In a quiet storage room in Butte Montana, a museum drawer holds an object that should have settled into obscurity long ago. It is only 9 inches long, dark green with corrosion, tapered at one end, and marked by 11 spiral grooves cut so evenly that they appear less like handwork than machining. Its catalogue label is cautious, unidentified copper alloy artifact, disputed origin. The wording protects the institution from a claim it cannot prove. Yet the object's story, if even partly accurate, begins not in a workshop, not in a forge, and not in a 19th-century machine shop, but inside solid rock 800 feet below a Montana copper mine. The mystery is not simply that the object looks unusual. The mystery is that a named shift boss reportedly found it on a specific night, in a specific mine, after a failed blast opened a section of rock that should have contained nothing but ore. A consulting geologist examined the metal. A mine blacksmith allegedly failed to reproduce its spiral. A shift book recorded the discovery, then fell silent for 3 days. And the object itself survived not in a secret vault, but through the hands of one miner's family, until it reached a museum drawer. On February 11, 1889, Thomas Bracken descended into the blue vein workings above Silverbow Creek outside Butte. He had spent 11 years underground and understood the language of freshly blasted rock. He knew the broken seam, the loose matrix, the powder smoke hanging in the drift, the copper dust glittering in lamplight, and the unstable fractures that could turn a routine inspection into a burial. The powder crew had overcharged a hole on the 800-foot level the previous night. The blast had failed to clear the face properly, leaving a cracked mass of stone where a clean break should have been. Bracken raised his lamp and saw a dark green line trapped inside the rock. At first, it may have looked like mineral staining. Copper country was full of green oxidation, and no experienced miner would have assumed that every unusual color meant an artifact. But this line had boundaries. It ran too straight, too evenly, and too distinctly from the surrounding stone. Bracken did not strike it with a pick. He did not order another charge. He sent a boy to fetch the mine superintendent, Walter Deslave, and waited in the drift while the mountain settled around him. Deslave arrived before midnight. Together the two men began removing the surrounding stone by hand. They worked slowly because one careless blow might break whatever had been exposed, and another blast could destroy both the object and the evidence of where it had been found. Hour after hour they loosened the rock with small tools, lifted fragments away, and widened the opening. Their lamps threw hard shadows across the face. Near 4 in the morning, the object finally came free. It was roughly 9 inches long, flattened through the center, and tapered toward one end like a wedge or narrow chisel. Its surface was heavily corroded, but beneath the green crust the form was unmistakably regular. 11 grooves spiraled along the body, tightening as they approached the taper. They followed one another at intervals so consistent that later accounts would compare them to the thread of a machine screw. The men reportedly searched the cavity and surrounding fracture, looking for a crack, pocket, or channel through which the object might have entered. They found none. If the object came from loose fill, an old tunnel, or a natural cavity, then it could have been lost by an earlier worker and later trapped by collapse. If the blast scattered debris from another part of the face, its original position might have been misunderstood. But the surviving account insists on something more difficult. The metal was sealed inside unbroken rock, and the blast had exposed it without opening any route from the mine into the stone around it. Bracken and Deslave carried the piece to the surface, wrapped it in oilcloth, and placed it in the superintendent's office. Deslave entered the discovery in the shift book under Bracken's name and his own. Then he sent for the company's consulting geologist, Ansel Pruitt, a trained specialist who had published technical work on Montana copper mineralogy. Pruitt arrived within the week. He weighed it, measured it, sketched it, examined the exposed metal, and tested the alloy using the reagents available to him. According to the surviving description, Pruitt identified copper mixed with tin and a smaller amount of a third metal he could not determine. He called it a bronze, unlike any bronze catalogued in the mining literature he possessed. 19th-century analysis was limited, and many compositions known today could have appeared unusual to a field geologist working with basic chemical tests. But Pruitt's concern was not only the metal, it was the workmanship. He measured the spiral and reportedly found a pitch just under 1/10 of an inch per turn, consistent across all 11 visible turns. A machinist's caliper later placed the variance at less than 1/16 of an inch across the object's full length. Hand-cut threading in 1889 was possible, but it usually left evidence: chatter, uneven bite marks, changes in depth, or small corrections where the tool wandered. The blue vein object allegedly showed none. Beneath the corrosion, where Pruitt scraped a small window to bare metal, the surface appeared smoother than ordinary camp tooling could produce. Deslave asked the mine blacksmith to reproduce the grooves. The blacksmith had files, vises, hammers, and practical experience repairing machinery under difficult conditions. He spent a full day attempting to match the spiral and failed. The original looked machined. In a maintenance ledger, he reportedly wrote 2 statements that sit uneasily together. The object appeared to have been made by a machine, yet no machine in the territory could have made it. That statement must be treated carefully. Lathes existed in 1889. Railroads, mining companies, foundries, and machine shops used sophisticated equipment. The question is not whether any 19th-century machine could cut a spiral. The question is whether the object's form, alloy, context, and alleged position inside the rock can be reconciled with ordinary mining activity. A modern object placed in the mine would explain the precision. A genuine artifact sealed inside ancient rock would create a much larger problem. The entire case depends on which context is true. There is another reason the case deserves patience rather than excitement. Underground discoveries are remembered under terrible conditions. Miners work in noise, dust, darkness, and danger. A fractured wall can appear solid when hidden seams run beyond the lamp's reach. A piece of equipment can become embedded in collapse and later seem enclosed by ancient stone. Memory then preserves the strongest image while losing measurements, directions, and sequence. None of this means Bracken lied. It means the reliability of the story rests on records created before memory had time to reshape the scene. That is why the missing pages matter more than any dramatic interpretation attached to them by careful, later storytellers. The company's response was not dramatic. No newspaper announced a discovery that would overturn history. Instead, the record became thinner. The shift book had been maintained carefully for years, recording powder use, wages, injuries, maintenance, and ore output. The entry for Bracken's discovery reportedly remained. After it came 3 missing pages, cut near the binding rather than casually torn. The next surviving entry appeared 4 days later, written in a clerk's hand, with no mention of the artifact. Missing pages do not prove suppression. Later collectors sometimes cut documents apart, yet the timing matters because the gap covers the exact period during which the object sat in Delov's office awaiting Pruitt. A company that tracked ore by the pound and wages by the cent left no surviving official account of the geologist's visit, the blacksmith's test, or the decision that followed. Bureaucracies often silence anomalies not through conspiracy, but through classification. If no existing form can contain a problem, the easiest solution is to stop creating paperwork about it. Pruitt's career adds another layer. Before 1889, he had published 2 papers on Montana copper mineralogy. After the blue vein examination, his name appeared once more in a survey index, attached to a short paper on irrigation drainage in the Gallatin Valley. 2 years later, he accepted a position in another territory. He never again published on Montana copper. A private letter to a colleague in Helena, in which he reportedly compared the grooves to machine screw threading, received no known follow-up. A career change is not evidence of intimidation. Pruitt may have concluded that the object was a contamination, a hoax, or an industrial oddity unworthy of further work. He may have lacked funding. He may simply have wanted to leave Montana. But within the surviving story, the only trained expert who examined the artifact closely moved away from the subject almost immediately. His silence would be less noticeable if the company's records had expanded around the discovery. Instead, his withdrawal and the missing pages seemed to echo one another. The strangest decision came next. Before the piece could be shipped east for further study, Deslave reportedly gave it to Bracken as a keepsake for a job well done under difficult rock. No formal transfer survives. The only reference appears in a personal letter Deslave wrote to his brother. If the company believed the object important, handing it to a miner was reckless. If it believed the object meaningless, the earlier examination seems excessive. Either way, the transfer allowed the artifact to escape the institution that first documented it. Bracken kept the object in his home. He continued working in Montana copper camps for another 19 years, yet no surviving letter shows him building theories around it. According to later family recollections, he told the story plainly and consistently. The rock had broken, the green metal appeared. He called the superintendent. They removed it by hand. A geologist examined it. Then the company stopped discussing it. He kept it because he could not explain it and did not want it lost. After Bracken's death, the artifact passed through several Montana households. By the 1960s, a museum in Bozeman acquired it. There, it received a cautious label, Unidentified Copper Alloy Artifact of Disputed Origin. Museum catalogues separate physical objects from claims attached to them. The institution can preserve the metal while declining to certify that it came from undisturbed rock. In that sense, the artifact survived, while its most important context remained suspended outside the official record. The blue vein tool would be easier to dismiss as an isolated curiosity if the copper country of North America did not already contain vast evidence of earlier mining. Hundreds of miles northeast, across Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula and Isle Royale, 19th-century prospectors repeatedly encountered ancient pits hidden beneath forest and soil. Some cut deep into bedrock. Wooden tools survived in cold, waterlogged ground. Masses of copper had been loosened from the matrix, moved, staged, and sometimes left behind. These workings are not evidence of an unknown machine civilization. Indigenous peoples mined and worked Lake Superior copper for thousands of years, and archaeological research has documented sophisticated extraction, toolmaking, exchange, and cultural use. The genuine mystery lies not in denying that history, but in understanding its scale. Early geologists estimated that enormous quantities of copper had been removed over long periods. Some pits contained tools still inside. Others appeared deliberately filled. Heavy copper masses rested near extraction points rather than deep within unfinished cuts. The landscape showed organization, persistence, and knowledge that later miners initially underestimated. A working abandoned suddenly looks different from one closed intentionally. Abandonment leaves disorder, broken tools where they fell, incomplete cuts, scattered supplies, and unstable openings. Deliberate closure can leave gathered tools, staged material, and refilled pits. 19th-century surveyors sometimes interpreted Lake Superior sites as carefully closed rather than merely deserted. Later, industrial workers entered copper landscapes and discovered that earlier people had already understood the ground, removed metal, and altered the terrain in ways the newcomers did not expect. The disputed Aiud object from Romania offers a useful warning. In 1974, quarry workers reportedly uncovered an aluminum alloy object in sediment associated with mastodon remains. Some analysts argued that its oxide layer and composition suggested great age. Others identified it as modern industrial scrap, possibly part of excavation machinery or aircraft equipment that entered older sediment through disturbance. The case is valuable not because it proves ancient aluminum technology, but because it demonstrates how quickly an object in the wrong layer can become detached from the conditions of its discovery. For any anomalous artifact, context is everything. Was the layer undisturbed? Did independent witnesses document its position? Was the surrounding material sampled? Can the chain of custody be reconstructed? Were tests repeated by laboratories with no connection to the original claim? The Blue Vein story has names, a date, an alleged shift book entry, a geologist, and a surviving object. What it lacks is a photograph of the artifact inside the rock, preserved fragments of the enclosing stone, and modern independent analysis connecting the metal to the mine. That absence does not make the account worthless. It defines what can and cannot be claimed. The object cannot honestly be presented as proof of a prehistoric machine culture in Montana, yet dismissing it without examination is equally unsatisfactory if the artifact still exists. Modern instruments could answer basic questions Pruitt could only approach. X-ray fluorescence could identify the alloy. Metallography could reveal casting, forging, or machining. Microscopic analysis could distinguish hand filing from lathe cutting. Three-dimensional scanning could measure the spiral precisely. Corrosion and mineral residue might reveal whether the object spent significant time in a particular geological environment. Even perfect laboratory results would not solve everything. A 19th-century machined alloy could still have been planted or accidentally introduced into the mine. An unusual corrosion profile might show age without proving the original location. Without the enclosing rock or a secure chain of custody, science may determine how the object was made while remaining unable to prove where it was found. But that would still move the case beyond rumor. It could separate genuine manufacturing features from details added through retelling. The central mystery is therefore no longer simply who made the object. It is why an artifact surrounded by such specific claims has apparently never received the comprehensive public testing capable of resolving its most basic properties. Museums have limited budgets. Disputed objects attract controversy but not funding. Curators may see little reason to test an item whose excavation context cannot be verified. Researchers prefer material tied to secure archaeological sites. A small corroded tool with a dramatic family history can remain untouched for decades because every possible result risks being inconclusive. Return to the drawer in Bozeman. The object lies still beneath its cautious label. Somewhere in a regional archive, the shift book allegedly preserves Bracken's entry and the gap that follows it. Above Silverbow Creek, the mountain remains, though the Blue Vein shaft was sealed after the accessible copper ran out. The mine cannot easily be revisited. The witnesses are gone. The paper trail is incomplete. Only the artifact, the archived record, and the story remain. Imagine the night again. Powder smoke hangs in the drift. Bracken's lamp moves across the damaged face. A green line appears in stone where no worked metal should be. He does not shout about lost civilizations. He does not run to a newspaper. He calls the superintendent. The two men remove the rock by hand, wrap the object, record the find, and wait for someone more qualified to explain it. The original actors, as remembered, behaved less like myth-makers than workers confronted by a problem. Perhaps the object was introduced through a fracture they failed to notice. Perhaps the blast mixed debris from different sections of the face. Perhaps a prank, forgotten tool, or later contamination became attached to a dramatic story. Perhaps the missing pages were cut decades afterward. Perhaps Pruitt's report has been misquoted, and the spiral's precision exaggerated through repetition, but none has yet been demonstrated strongly enough to close the case. What survives is narrower than proof and stronger than folklore. A physical artifact exists, a named discovery story follows it. Technical observations were allegedly made by a professional geologist and a mine blacksmith. The official record reportedly becomes incomplete at the moment attention should have increased. The object then leaves institutional custody, survives through a family, and reaches a museum under a label that preserves uncertainty rather than resolving it. The honest conclusion is not that an advanced civilization machined bronze before the mountain formed. Geology alone makes that claim enormous, and enormous claims require evidence the blue vein story does not possess. The honest conclusion is that a testable object remains connected to a remarkable account, and that account has never been examined with the thoroughness required either to validate or dismantle it. Thomas Bracken is gone, Walter Deslaw is gone, Ansel Pruitt is gone, the mine is sealed, the pages remain missing, yet the spiral still circles the object 11 times, indifferent to every theory built around it. It waits not for another legend, but for measurement, not for a believer, but for a careful metallurgist, not for someone eager to rewrite history, but for someone willing to ask whether the metal, the tool marks, the corrosion, and the surviving documents agree. Until that happens, the blue vein tool will remain suspended between three possibilities: a misunderstood 19th century object, an elaborate story built around an ordinary artifact, or a genuine anomaly recovered from a context no surviving record can adequately explain. The museum has preserved the evidence but not pursued the question, and the silence surrounding those 11 grooves continues to do what silence does best. It leaves just enough space for doubt and just enough evidence for the mystery to endure.